Now we're going to continue with our hearing, and let me yield to my good friend for any questions that he might have. Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you to all the witnesses for your time here today. Ms. Kalinowski, you have a very impressive resume. You've done a lot of things, and there's a lot of things on your plate, and unfortunately for you, if something goes wrong, we find out in a very dramatic manner. I was excited to hear you mention not once but twice in your testimony about the use of modeling, and take that's modeling and simulation that you're utilizing. Two questions regarding that. One, are we giving you everything you need now to do all the modeling that you need to accomplish your goals? And if not, how can we help you there as a Congress? Because I think that's absolutely crucial for you to be able to do. And then the second thing is, how do developers or individuals who are doing some of these projects tap into the modeling that you have at an early stage? Because I know you have probably some privacy concerns and some things that you don't want to allow them to know. Is it some way that they can utilize that modeling capability at the front end instead of waiting at the back end and finding out, oh my gosh, this is having a huge negative impact?
Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Forbes. I appreciate it. We have enjoyed great support from the Congress for our resources, and we believe that we are using them efficiently and effectively, and so we do thank you for your support in that department. We are also working closely with the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security in terms of educating ourselves and improving the modeling that we have to bring to the challenges of wind farms and understanding the limitations of radar. We have been very impressed with the Joint Program Office and the work that has been done by the Department of Defense's office. We refer to them as the 84th Raids. That is their office that does extensive work and modeling on long-range radar and the effect of wind turbines on radar. Our technical people, our engineers within the FAA, have been working very closely with them to understand the radar and to develop and look to the professional community on better modeling and simulation. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Do we know how many turbines exist today? I know you mentioned about 100,000 projects that had been approved. Do we know how many actual turbines have been constructed, and how many do we predict will be constructed over the next 5 years?
I mentioned the statistics before. We received 1,500 cases to look at this week alone. So it is definitely increasing in numbers. I know that the administration and the Department of Energy and Mr. Webster's supporting association, AWEA, have hoped that we can move toward energy independence by increasing the number. If there are 100,000 today that have been approved, I know that their hopes are to go upwards to 800,000 in the future. So we are gearing up to make sure that the Department of Defense and the FAA can address that kind of influx of cases and to analyze exactly what their impact would be on military readiness.
Mr. Webster, do you have any idea currently how many turbines we have already constructed, and what's your best projection for how many we would expect to have constructed within the next 5 years?
Sir, I don't think we have an accurate number. We can certainly try and estimate that and get back with you and the others. I would say that and this is a very difficult issue to address, but the lion's share of the proposals that are brought into the FAA, for example, and other agencies don't actually become real projects. And so while there is 100,000 turbines that have been assessed in any given year, we're talking somewhere on the order of a magnitude less than that actually come to fruition. So it's a difficult tug and pull, if you will, trying to determine, from an agency perspective, what is actually going to become an actual project versus what is just sort of a touch by the industry to try and determine whether or not there's going to be an impact in that particular area.
The chairman and I were talking at the break about impacts these could have on our bases and other types of things in there. I think it would be useful for us. It's just like when we're doing planning for highways or anything else. It is, I think, a crucial piece of information to know how many cars we think we have on the road and how many we would expect to have on the road in 5 years. So if you could help us with those numbers, I think it would be useful for the committee, even though it's not exact, if we can just get our hands around how many we think we've got out there and how many is our best estimate of what we'll have in the next 5 years could be useful information for us. And Dr. Robyn and General, Dr. Robyn made a statement that I certainly do not disagree with. You said that we should not have to accept a decrease in military readiness to support national energy initiatives, or some paraphrase of that. The problem is, as we all know, sometimes just from a timing sequence, even if we have enough money, we can't get things underway. And sometimes with the budget concerns we have today, we have a budgetary concern. In all of the witnesses' opinions, do you think that there would ever be a time that we should accept a decrease in military readiness to support national energy initiatives? And I don't care who starts, whoever has that opinion, but we would just like your thoughts on that.
I think it's a mistake to frame the problem that way, because
Okay,
I think
help
the
me.
message that, and what I said in my statement was, the country should not and does not have to choose between national security and the development of renewable energy. And I think what you've heard all of us say is that the two key words, improving the process, which allows for early discussions and increases the chances significantly of working out some sort of mitigation. And the other is technology. And there's an overlap, because so far mitigation largely means moving the radar to a different place. But there's a whole, mitigation also means changes to the radar itself, improvements in the software, improvements in the hardware, potentially replacement of the radar. I'm not saying that every problem can be solved, and even Mr. Webster said there is no silver bullet, but we have yet to really bring to bear the potential for technological development or insertion of better technology.
And Doctor, I guess then I kind of take back my statement where I agreed with you then, because I disagree with you, because I think while it may be our goal that the two don't conflict, the real world we live in is that it's not just theory. The real world, sometimes it does come down to a conflict, either, again, because of timing, we just can't get there quick enough, or because of money. So if you can't address that, General, do you feel...
Can I just
sure, yeah,
let me address each of those, because when I said we ought not have to choose, I
agree with you. We shouldn't have to choose.
We shouldn't have to
but
choose.
unfortunately, sometime in this committee,
timing is critical. I don't mean to imply that you just say, okay, we're never going to say no because we can figure out how to solve the problem technically. So the key to fixing the process is so that you have the time so that we can learn about projects early, work with developers to come up with a mitigation strategy, whether it involves moving the turbines or improving the radar. But no, timing is absolutely critical. The second thing is money, and no one's put this on the table yet. I'm wishing I had done this in my testimony. These wind energy development projects are they're big, and they involve a lot of investment, and that is a potential. Those developers are a potential source of improvements in the technology. That is this is something that happens in other areas when one person wants to make better use of the electromagnetic spectrum, and what they are proposing would interfere with somebody who's occupying the spectrum, they will pay to upgrade the receivers so that their activity doesn't create interference. That's very common. There's a market for that. We need to develop the same kind of thing here.
And I don't disagree with that. And again, all you guys are good guys. This is not a white hat, black hat. These are not trick questions. I mean, the question, though, at some point, this committee just has to keep in mind as our checkoff, and I think it's a fair question, is the department willing to accept decreased military readiness to support national energy initiatives? It's a fair response to say, we hope to have both. It's a fair response to say, we need both. It's a fair response to say, we hope we don't have to choose between them. But none of those are my question. My question is, if whether it's because of timing or budgets or whatever else, beyond any of our controls in here, if we have to choose, it's a simple question. Would the department be willing to accept a decreased military readiness to support national energy initiatives?
We haven't to date, and I don't think we intend to accept a significant level of reduction in military readiness, no.
General, what was your response, Ben?
Yes, sir. As you know, I can't speak for the Department of Defense, but as the COCOM, I can. And we, of course, will always do a very serious and detailed operational risk assessment based upon interference that may be caused by these wind turbines. And as it's clear that in our mission, we have to be able to detect and track, and if necessary, take action on a track of interest before it injures or hurts American citizens. So in that risk assessment, we will be very sober and objective about risk that is unacceptable. And in the operational realm, if we have risk that's unacceptable, we have to mitigate that down to an acceptable level. So in our part of this process, we'll be very forthright with that analysis, which we've focused quite a bit in the last few weeks and bolstered. However, I do also share OSD's, Dr. Robyn's comment that some of the recent studies and what we see, there's probably a lot of technological pieces out there in the future that can help mitigate that risk. We will not, as a combatant command, want to have any kind of gap, however, that's unacceptably managed.
And General, I'm sure you're articulating it a lot better than I'm understanding it, so I don't want to push you further than you can go. But I'm still, sometime we have to just come down to hard and fast decisions. Is it your opinion that we should ever accept a decrease in military readiness to support national energy initiatives?
Once again, that's a policy question for the department, but we will always, from the operational level, mitigate that risk in some way.
And General, I'll try this one more time, because what we're told by the Secretary of Defense always is when we have witnesses here, we can ask you your personal opinion. And we rely on those personal opinions. Again, it's not a trick question. It's something we need to know. In your personal opinion, should we ever accept I understand we want to mitigate, we want to not be there, but if it comes down to it, should we ever accept a decrease in our military readiness to support national energy initiatives?
Yes, sir. In my opinion, Homeland Defense is our top priority, our mission priority, and that should take precedent.
Thank you. And Ms. Kalinowski, same thing.
I can certainly speak for the FAA that we would not accept a degradation of the safe and efficient use of the navigable airspace. I believe that we at this table all want to support a national goal toward energy independence, and that also speaks to the nation's security. Thank you.
Fair response. And Mr. Webster?
I would say that we do, as an industry, obviously do not want to see a significant or adverse impact to our ability as a nation to protect ourselves, and do not advocate nor want to promote any notion that the industry feels that it is somehow higher in importance than national security. That said, the industry does feel, along with our counterparts in the agencies, that there are real technical solutions that can be deployed today, and it's just the amount of collective willpower to mobilize that technology to resolve these issues so that we do not have that adverse impact threshold reached, which to this date, at least according to the Concurrent Technologies Corporation's recent report, has not been reached.
Good, and thank you all so much for your expertise. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back, Councilman.
Mr. Kissel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our witnesses for being here today. I have a series of questions that more or less trying to get an idea in my mind, some of the parameters of the issues, and so I'm not even sure I can direct them to one person or not. But the first question, Ms. Kalinowski, when you talk about projects that are being given to us and that y'all are reviewing, on average, how many devices per project, how big of an area are these projects, kind of just the scope of what an average project would consist of?
Thank you, Congressman. If you're speaking of wind farms, we have dealt with wind farms as small as 4 or 5 wind turbines, but the average is more along the lines of 100 to 200 wind turbines, on up to 500.
And these devices, on average in size, I had read, some can be as high as tall as 500 feet. What's the average size of one of the wind turbines?
I think Mr. Webster would probably be a better person to ask that question, but we have dealt with them ranging from 200 to 400 feet.
Mr. Webster, would that be in the neighborhood then?
400 to 425 feet.
Okay, good, thank you. And Dr. Robyn, I'm going to give these questions to you, and then once again, feel free to move them to somebody if in the best place. The issue itself and the radar interference, is it more of an issue based upon where the wind farms are and to the number of miles to the base, or is it more of a directional issue, or is it elevational issue, or what creates a situation where some wind farms might be a problem and others wouldn't be?
I'm an economist, not a physicist. So my understanding is certainly you see in many places wind turbines near military bases with no issue. It becomes a problem. It's very case by case, and it can become a problem. The two key things: line of sight. That's an issue. If the turbines are shielded from the radar by the terrain, there's not an issue. So line of sight, and the number of turbines, so that you can have 500 turbines that do not create an issue, and then when you add another 100, the cumulative impact on existing technology, particularly the older radar, can become a problem.
And General, with that said, and once again, I don't know where is the best place to ask these questions. So you have some farms that could be within a few miles and not be a problem, and others somewhere else that could be a problem. Is there a difference in the radar between, are they more of an issue for our long-range radars versus short and radars? Is it more specific? And can we predict, as the modeling that Mr. Forbes was talking about, can we predict where we would have a problem and not have a problem?
Yes, sir. It does vary from radar type to radar type. It's very dependent upon the environment. So, for example, I can speak to simply one piece of this, which is, once again, the operations risk assessment. We look at that in terms of what is that environment around the radar itself. So, once again, depending upon the sophistication or the technology of the radar itself, it may deal with that interference better or worse. The one radar that Dr. Robyn talked about out at Shepherd's Flat, of course, is an older radar, and it shows a lot of clutter based upon that interference that comes from those wind turbines.
And the last question, well, I'll see how my time is with this last question, but you know, it would seem to me that that if you are looking at a huge investment and you know of this issue as being a problem, that you would want to go to whatever authority much sooner than 30 days from the time you want to start building this. Are we seeing that people are coming to us from the initial concepts and saying, hey, do you think this is going to be a problem? Are we seeing any of that?
The industry has largely been increasing its level of engagement with the agencies much sooner for the past, I would say, 4 years when this issue first arose to a sort of national prominence, if you will. The result of that has been a largely unanimous recommendation from all the stakeholders that there is no process to engage in. So you have situations where a military facility is engaged by a single developer. The military facility makes a recommendation that there will not be an adverse impact, and it isn't until 2 or 3 years later, when a formal review process by the FAA is undertaken, that a differing opinion by a different entity within the DoD says, actually, there is an impact. By that time, millions, if not billions of dollars have been invested in that asset. And then, of course, you clearly have the national defense question in mind, so it creates an automatic tension between the stakeholders that could have been resolved if there had been a process in place.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, panel, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Appreciate you being here. Just to set the record, I represent a district that's in the top 3 or 4 in the nation on wind power generation. So please don't interpret anything I'm saying as being anti-wind, because it's some of my wind friends have thin skin sometimes. Mr. Webster, are all of the sites across the United States fully developed, and the only ones left to develop are the ones that potentially interfere with military operations?
No, there's a variety of...
So we've had this conversation this morning as if the only ones left out there to be developed were the ones who have this potential problem with military readiness. And I just want the record to show that there are zillions of sites, for lack of a better phrase, that have nothing to do and have no interference whatsoever that are available for development for the industry. Ms. Robyn, Dr. Robyn mentioned an interesting phrase or a concept. What are the barriers to the system? As an example, you got a developer that wants to put some wind towers in a particular place. It gets in front of an older radar set, and that radar would need to be upgraded to mitigate. Are there barriers to allowing the developer to say, in order to move this project forward, I will pay to have the radar upgraded or whatever mitigation costs are needed to eliminate the problem that the military is having? Can that investor or developer group fold those costs in, and are there barriers to letting that happen?
I think the biggest barrier is that most people haven't thought about it that way. We're not used to thinking of operating that way. There may be a technical legal barrier to us accepting money from a developer, but yeah. I think it's an
well, I do too. It's something that business would do all of the time.
Absolutely.
You mentioned it. It's not a foreign concept.
Absolutely.
Mr. Webster, you might have your group look at that concept. Obviously, if the radars are doing the job that we want them to do, and a developer comes in and wants to interfere with that, it shouldn't be the responsibility of the taxpayers to upgrade the existing facility to meet the need of that developer. I would think that if that site's worthy, then it could fade the costs of the other development. General, throughout the NDAA, there is immense emphasis on the Department of Defense single-handedly eliminating our need for foreign oil. We spend a lot of money that way on wind generation, alternative sources, all kinds of things. It would be helpful to us as decision makers, because I think Department of Defense budgets are going to start looking a lot flatter than they have in the last 7 or 8 years, to know what that delta is. In other words, what would we pay for energy the traditional way versus this emphasis that we've gone across the DOD? What's that delta, and what are we trading? Are we trading MRAPs? Are we trading body armor? Are we trading a second engine? What is it so that as a policy, we can say, okay, this cost, these extra costs to the system that doesn't have to be there. It's there only because of something else. What are we trading for that? What could we use that dollar for? Do you have that number by chance, or is there a way to get at it?
Sir, I don't. And of course, at the Combatant Command, we establish requirements that are processed by the Pentagon. I can take that question for record and route it and get you an answer back
Okay.
on that.
I do think that, the Secretary is looking for $100 billion over the next 5 years. And we ought to know what we're trimming out of the $100 billion. A report yesterday that Air Force is going to mothball the B-1 bombers and a significant number, 250 fighters, under this cost-saving hat. Not for defense, not for capacity, not for anything. It's just cost-saving hat. It would be helpful for us as policymakers next year to know what the department is spending on energy that they don't have to spend, but for requirements under the NDAA, particularly since in the last 3 years. With that, I yield back.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
is your question, how much are we spending on energy? Because
No, what's
I
the
can
delta?
answer that. The delta between,
Between what we would have spent, but for all of this emphasis on renewables and the Department of Defense doing a lot of stuff that they don't have to do.
oh, I would disagree. I was with you up until that.
So you
But
think you would trade wind power
Well,
for body armor?
we very much look at this. I believe it was General Mattis during the Iraq War said, please release us from the tether of fuel. And that prompted a Defense Science Board report which said, we're losing lives, and we are spending enormous amounts of money to get fuel to forward operating bases. And the cost that what we pay for fuel is the tip of the iceberg. The real cost is our soft underbelly is the logistics tail to get that fuel to forward operating bases.
I'm not talking...
Insofar as we can use renewable in forward operating bases, which we're working on, we can reduce that. And in domestic bases, which I oversee, we are vulnerable to disruption of the commercial electricity grid, and renewable energy combined with energy efficiency, smart microgrids can increase mission assurance.
And that comes in front of other requirements that DOD has. We're not making a rational decision, because the folks out there have just said, the majority has said over the last 3 years, this is an important deal. And so you guys have gone down that path. I've had 4 stars tell me that they have to come out of hide for all this extra costs so that they can look green. It's not mission critical to what they're doing. And you're not going to power an MRAP with a battery or with a wind turbine that's on it.
You're not going to power an MRAP, but renewables have an important...
You argue with me that the fuel on the battlefield is what you're worried about, and I'm just saying that's not what we're talking about.
A significant amount of the fuel that is transported to forward operating bases is used to power generators, to heat and cool tents, to operate
so we're going to build wind towers in Iraq.
Well, I don't know if it'll be wind, but we are absolutely spending
more money on energy than we would otherwise have to spend on energy.
We've been running a 270 megawatt geothermal plant at China Lake for 20-some years.
And it costs more to do that than to buy the energy out of the grid.
You can go ahead and answer that.
No, I think we disagree here. I think it will cost the department money up front to develop renewables. It will cost the country money up front. Part of that is because we don't put a price on carbon, and so we do need to.
And the science is settled on that's an issue. I mean, you're
putting a price on carbon?
Yes, the science is settled on that.
Well, I think that's an economic question, there are huge externalities from carbon emissions which aren't captured in the price of carbon. So that's the price of fossil fuels. But there is the quadrennial, I point to the QDR, the Quadrennial Defense Review, which says that our dependence on fossil fuels is a national security issue. And it's an issue for domestic installations. Renewables are not the silver bullet, but they have an important place.
But you will get me the difference in costs that the department incurs between what they could have done normally versus.
I think
this
we're
other
going to
one.
have time because we got other members, and we'll have to have probably a second round of questions, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Rand Corporation estimates that about 16 to 18% of the total defense budget is specifically designed and for the purpose of protecting the sea lanes in the Gulf of Hormuz so that we could have oil. We're at great risk at any moment of that strait being shut down, in which case we would have a very serious problem in America. So 16%, let's just say 15%, is $120 billion a year for that one purpose, according to the Rand Corporation. With regard to the issue that we just heard about, it is imperative for every one of our bases to become as self-sufficient for energy as possible so as to avoid the problem of a shutdown of the grid. This committee has heard testimony on cyber warfare and the potential problems that it presents to us. It is a very significant issue, and spending money on renewables at the base, conservation at the bases, and other ways of making our bases, both domestic and international, self-sufficient and not dependent upon the importation or upon oil arriving at the appropriate moment is of utmost importance. Now, to the issue at hand, which happens to be wind turbines and the bases. First of all, I want to thank the industry for the work that you're doing in the Travis area, Fairfield area, and the wind energy that is extremely important in that area. You have undertaken a joint operation with the Air Force at Travis to find ways of dealing with the interference that the wind turbines provide, and you're also providing money to fund the studies. And that's the way it should be done. So I thank the industry for that. I also want to, Dr. Robyn, if I might just ask you about efforts that are underway to ameliorate the problem that exists with regard to the Travis domestic flight. We're not talking about long-range radars here, but rather those that are specific for flight control at the bases. Could you just comment on the work that's being done? Some studies that are underway. I understand Raytheon and the United Kingdom has a study underway. I think there's a Janssen report.
I'm not sure I can speak to Travis in particular. The work with Raytheon, you may be referring to the CRADA that I mentioned in my opening remarks, something the Air Force entered into just recently, a cooperative R&D agreement for the aim of which is to identify hardware and software improvements in radar that can reduce wind interference. I think the UK, that may be a reference to the TPSY, the TPS-77 radar, which is a radar that the UK feels, it's a Lockheed Martin radar, I believe. It deals, there is some evidence to suggest that it deals fairly well with wind turbine interference. We have not yet looked at that closely.
If I might just
Yes.
interrupt, it's my understanding that the radar systems at Travis are being significantly upgraded to deal with the wind turbine, with the wind farm nearby, and that it is possible to use enhanced software to achieve the necessary air traffic controls for that. The other, and so if you could deliver to me and perhaps to the committee a display of the various activities that are going on. Most of the
I'd be happy
testimony
to.
thank you. Most of the testimony we've had here today concerns long-range radar systems, which are quite antiquated in most cases. It's pretty hard to move the wind from one location to another, but it may be easier to move the radar, particularly if it's an older system that's going to get replaced sometime in the future, perhaps with the next-gen system of air traffic control coming up. And so I'd like to have some comments on that, as well as the upgrading and the role of the industry in helping to pay for it. The concept that was developed here a few moments ago, I think, is an appropriate one. So, General, if you would start, and then the industry, and then FAA. And we have 3 seconds.
Yes, sir. We work very closely right now with a number of federal agencies, with the developers, when we find that through our operational risk assessment, there's a problem, there's kind of conflict. Some of those methods, and I think there's a number, besides relocating wind turbines outside line of sight, that would be the most effective. But we can change the sighting, the geometry, the spacing to assist in reducing those effects. Yes, some tuning of the radars are possible based upon a growth in clutter across time in the environment, so simple maintenance may help. And of course, we're seeing more and more, especially in the urgencies of looking at technology, that there are probably software and hardware fixes that can be inserted in these older radars that could reduce the impact of the wind turbine interference.
Thank you.
I think largely there has been some dialogue by the stakeholders with respect to moving radars. My understanding is that that is largely about as feasible as moving the wind projects themselves, which is the other mitigation solution that has often been talked about, both of which I suppose are possible but not probable in terms of being effective, both cost-wise as well as technology-wise. The radar systems were put in place where they were because they optimized our field of vision from a national defense perspective as well as from an air traffic control perspective. In a similar vein, we put the turbines where we do because of the wind being present. Again, however, there is a number of opportunities that have been discoursed for the past few years that allow us the ability to upgrade those radars, and possibly R&D technology that can be inputted onto the turbine side of the equation to ameliorate the problems.
Thank you. FAA.
It is, thank you for the question, Congressman. It is very expensive to move a long-range radar, not very feasible at all. I think both gentlemen made very good points about that. I think our future lies in either a software upgrade, a hardware upgrade, or finding other alternatives to essentially mitigate the project.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, in 30 seconds, I do want to just make a final comment that the U.S. Air Force, together with the wind industry, 3 developers in the Solano area, have made significant progress on accommodating additional turbines and the safety and the air traffic control at a major base with probably flights taking off every 90 seconds or so. So it can be done, and it's software and it's location of the radars, and also, most important of all, a willingness to work together. And I thank you for what you've been able to accomplish there.
Thank you. Before I go to the next member who is visiting with us today, let me ask a question. Now, we were talking about a Kingsville a few moments ago, and I know that some of you are mitigating some of the circumstances, but I was just wondering, Ms. Robyn, can you explain what steps the Department of Defense is taking to preserve military readiness across the nation, specifically in Kingsville? Because, and we appreciate the energy that you, Mr. Webster, are providing. I mean, we need it, God knows that. But my 2 bases sit right in the middle of them. If you fly in from San Patricio County, I think you see at least, if not 200, maybe more windmills. And then when you go south, going to the valley, South Padre Island, you see maybe 300 or 400 of them. What is the Department of Defense doing to come up with answers as to how we're going to protect our readiness? Yes, ma'am.
I don't, we have not, I was not aware of the Kingsville situation until recently. We've not had, leaving, I'll come back to that one, but I'm not aware that we've had an issue with wind turbines and training routes. The most training routes, most low-level training routes are on public land. The process is easier when it's public land. We get advance warning from BLM typically, or the public land holder. So we have not, I am told by our personnel and readiness folks, that has not been an issue. Kingsville, clearly, we need to look at that. The process seems to have broken down there because the FAA was not, the Navy did not object to the proposed turbines as part of the OE-AAA process. Nancy can say more about, apparently those radars there are not even part of the National Aerospace System. They're not in the system at the FAA. So the process broke down. I'd like to look at it more closely, number one, see whether there's some lessons from Travis that we can bring to NAS Kingsville.
Ms. Kalinowski, would you like to respond or give us any input, or Mr. Webster, to the same question? I mean, how can, you know, what I really want to know, and things are moving pretty fast. I mean, when you say that hundreds of thousands of them are requesting, you know, authorization to do that, how long will it take for all four of you to get together and come up with a plan? Can you do that? Because this is moving too fast, and it's very costly, and readiness is at stake. Do you think you all can get together and come up with maybe a solution? I know it's going to be expensive when you talk about upgrading or buying new radars. It's going to be very, very expensive. When Chairman Gage came down, he says, you know what, we're going to have to cut down on defense to the point whether it's going to be, you know, research and development and other items that we need, or whether we're going to have to cut down on health care for our service people. So this is a very serious, serious problem. But how much time do you think you need to come up with a plan that we all can work and sing from the same page for all of you?
Well, from an industry standpoint, we have been advocating for 4 years now that a process of earlier engagement that meets the needs of all the stakeholders be developed. And I think that largely the conversations that we've had with the other stakeholders, both in the public and private sector, have resulted in a good laundry list, if you will, of elements that would be contained within such a process. And now it's just a matter of actually implementing, or more fully developing and implementing that process.
Congressman, there is the National Security Council initiated an interagency process in the wake of the controversy over Shepherd's Flat. Shepherd's Flat was an unfortunate controversy, but it was useful in galvanizing attention. And that's an ongoing process, looking in particular at the FAA siting review process and whether and if that needs to be, whether and how that needs to be updated to take account of current national security needs and operations. I think there is a legitimate question as to whether the FAA has whether its authority would include issues related to our training and testing routes. So that is something that we're looking at on an interagency basis. But I don't think, I mean, I co-chair a group, standing group focused on protection of our ranges. I don't think I don't think this is a big problem in terms of maintaining readiness. I agree there's a situation at Kingsville that we need to look at closely, but I don't think you will find many examples of that.
Let me see if I can get somebody to put the map on the screen so you all can see it.
And we're going to hand out hard copies right now.
Okay, and she's going to hand out some copies so you can see how it's impacting on at least Kingsville for now. And another issue that is going to come up now, and you see a lot of investors coming up, and they look at solar panels. And they say that when they fly, you know, the reflection from these solar panels, and this is going to be another issue, impacts on those that are training up in the air. So that's going to be another, and they're all coming to the United States. And of course, we need all this energy, but as you can see, there's the map that we have and how we are impacted. But I think that the responsibility now lies on DOD if you can come up with a plan, because you are the ones that are being impacted. And of course, as team players, we like to work with the rest of you. So do you think, Ms. Robyn, that 30 days would be sufficient to come up with something that you can give the members of this committee?
I'd like to, there is an interagency process in place. I don't know exactly, so I'm a little hesitant to commit to 30 days, but
you'll try.
within a fairly short period of time, I think this process will run its course, and
Okay.
we can report back to you.
Okay, we, after consultation with the minority, I now ask unanimous consent that Ms. Halverston be authorized to question the panel members of at today's hearing. If there are no objections, I will now recognize Ms. Halverston. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the committee for allowing me to ask a couple questions. And I also want to thank you for the work you've done on this issue. I just wanted to ask a couple questions on a proposed wind farm in my district, which is Kankakee County, Illinois, which is about 45 miles south of Chicago. And it's called K4, which you all know about, and it's close to a radar system located in Joliet, Illinois. As a lot of people know, it's a $2 billion project with 310 proposed turbines. It also has an ARSR or an ARSR-3 radar, which is the one just like Shepherd's Flat. And I know that, and I feel that Shepherd's Flat radar should not be the only site receiving mitigation work and receiving the software upgrades and physical improvements. So my question is for Dr. Robyn, what upgrades can you make to the ARSR-3 radars nationwide in order for more wind farms and radars to coexist? Because as you know, we've been having major problems with this K4 wind farm project, and you all have been so wonderful to work with us to try to make it work. So I'm wondering, since we're having the same problems as Shepherd's Flat, that what could we do to make this somehow work with mitigation efforts?
Thank you, Congresswoman, and you've been terrific to work with on this issue as well. And I think what led to the response on Shepherd's Flat that was somewhat different is the construction was due to begin on May 1, and there was not an opportunity for the Air Force and the developer to go through the process that they normally would have. And so that led to the Lincoln Lab study and some other things. We do have that time in your district, and the RAIDS Air Force is looking at whether how different configuration of the turbines could help the problem. I agree that the technology has potential. I think the Lincoln Lab folks looked at a different radar. We can't assume that the same things would work, but it's encouraging. It suggests some things, and the pilot will offer us lessons for that.
So if these upgrades, though, are made, what's a realistic time for completion? Because we don't even hear that there's possibilities for upgrades. And
Yeah.
I think the other problem, which I think going forward that other people need to realize, is this is not a process that anybody thinks of before they go and make the decisions with the leaseholders and anybody who decides to even put a wind farm in place. Also, in regards to the FAA, Shepherd's Flat Wind Farm in Oregon, the FAA originally issued a notice of presumed hazard in March, and when the DOD eventually withdrew its objections in it to the Shepherd's Flat project in late April, a DOD spokesperson said that the impact of the project to the fossil ARSR-3 radar was not as great as once thought. So I think what my issue is, because we've been going back and forth with the same issue, the notice of presumed hazard, is it possible for this scenario to be the case again for other projects elsewhere? Because as you know, the fact is there's been, an issue with the upgrades not being made since 1990. And that's probably been one of the biggest problems with K4 is how up to date is the DOD's land cover and the terrain model data?
Yeah. Do you want to? I can't speak to the terrain model data. I think it's certainly worth taking a look at the, possibly having the Lincoln Lab folks look at the Joliet situation. This is the area next to Oregon, north central Oregon. This is the area that's most of concern. And as you know, this reached a crisis point in 2006 that led to some positive developments but did not go far enough. So I think it's worth looking at that. I think there are some improvements short of the service life extension program that may be suggested by the Lincoln Lab study. So I think it's worth taking a look at that, but also having the discussions about positioning of the turbines continue.
And my time is up, but I just want to reiterate that, we're dealing with data from 1990, that, it's not been easy to tell people that want to invest in communities and create jobs and do what they need to, how do we go back and want to mitigate these? So I appreciate all your help, but we need to do more. Thank you. I yield back, and thank you so much for the courtesy.
Well, thank you so much for you joining us today. And going back, if I understand correctly, the FAA review process is 30 days now?
The requirement, Congressman, is for it to be filed 30 days before construction begins. However, we strongly encourage all developers to file as early as possible with us to begin the discussions and to begin the education process with the Department of Defense and DHS.
So you're satisfied with the 30 days? You can get it around in 30 days?
We are... You made the suggestion earlier, Chairman, that we should consider a much earlier filing process, and we very much wish to consider that.
Yeah, and I would like for the DOD also to work with us, maybe get your team, Madam Secretary, to work and give us an interim report within 30 days, and maybe you can work on Kingsville and maybe give you an additional 30 days. Because the people there are concerned, and and rightly so. We have seen where there's a lot of joiners going on, and at one time, they would say that Kingsville's got all, open skies, you can train, you can do whatever you want to do, and that has changed now. We want to work together. This is why I said we can work as a team, those that are creating this energy. And quietly so, it's become a tourist spot because people like to drive and see all those windmills, just turning around. And I see people because between Corpus Christi and the valley is about 110 miles, and there's nothing but the windmills, cows, and horses. So it's become an attraction. But at the same time, we don't want it to impact on readiness. Let me yield to my good friend, Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, I thank all of you for being here. And Dr. Robyn, when I heard your colloquy with Mr. Conway just a few minutes ago, I just sit back and I ask this question, and first of all, I premise it the same way he does, that all of us up here support wind industry and what we're doing with a lot of our alternative energies, but 11% of the people in this country approve of this Congress, and 89% of them disapprove. And the reason most of them disapprove is because we come in here and we're good at hitting lofty goals. We can state them up and down here, we can state them from that witness stand, but they understand that the devil is always in the details. And over, what we are trying to get up here are the details. And we can't get them because all we get is a restatement of the lofty goals. We sit back here and the American people here drafting legislation in the Senate now where the drafter of the legislation says, we don't know how it's going to work or the impact until we pass the legislation and get it into effect. And the American people are saying, my gosh, what are they doing? This year, the American people are saying, give us the details in a budget. And this Congress is saying, no, we don't want to give the details. Let's talk about lofty goals. We won't do a budget. And the American people, 89% of them are saying, are they crazy up there? The budget's what shows the details. Last year, Department of Defense, by law, had to give us a shipbuilding plan so we could see on paper those details about how many ships we were building so we could see what actually came out last year. Chinese had more ships than we had in our Navy, and we couldn't get those details from the Department of Defense. And what Mr. Conway is asking seems like a simple question. And we finished, now I'm going to let you respond. You said you disagreed with him. He's not asking about which theory we pick or where we're going. He's saying, shouldn't the American people be entitled to know the cost differential between buying energy one way and by putting something in a bill that's going to cost us more, so that we can determine how many planes we have to give up to do that, how many ships we have to give up, how many MRAPs we have to give up, how many guns and how many bullets we have to give up. Because on our war fighters, when they come back, theories don't matter to them. It comes down to, do they have that air cover, do they have those bullets, and do they have those planes? And as the chairman said, we're getting realistic discussions now that we've got to cut out a lot of those real things because there's not enough money. And so the question I come back to is, why is that such an unreasonable question to say, can't we just come back and lay on the table the cost differential between doing it one way and doing it another way? Not policy, we can argue the policy.
Well, sir, we were, certainly, can I give you a plan for how we will achieve our goal set by the Congress, codified by the Congress, of achieving 25% renewable energy consumption by our installations by 2025. That's a goal given to us by the Congress.
Doctor, I'm not arguing that the Congress is doing everything right. I don't think that's what Mr. Conway's arguing. What we're just saying is, I'm sorry, it's still you're giving us goals. And what we're saying, and we understand we need goals, that's okay to have. But what's the cost?
No, sir, that's a goal that you gave us. That is not,
I'm not saying that I'm going to rubber stamp everything Congress does. I'm simply saying what Mr. Conway's saying is whether Congress gives the goal or whether DOD picks the goal, what's the cost of the implementation to try to get to the goal? Because I think you would agree with me, at some point in time, even if we love all of these energy plants, at some point in time, we're coming down to a situation that I've got to pick doing this or cutting out airplanes. That's what Mr. Conway just said. American people need to know this is a good goal, but how many ships is it going to cost us? How many planes is it going to cost us? Because you may get to the end of that goal and it not have done what you wanted it to do, whereas we know those ships and planes might have. And so my question is, not so much the plan, but the cost. Do you not feel that this committee and this Congress and the American people should have the right to know those cost differentials?
I'd be happy to to lay that out in the context of what we think it will save longer term. Last year in a budget briefing, the Army said to me, we didn't have enough money to invest in technology to reduce our utility bills because we were so strapped just to pay our utility bills. That's crazy. We should be making investments, not just renewable, but energy-saving technology to reduce. We consume 20 billion. We spent $20 billion a year on energy. 4 billion of that on facilities.
Dr. Robyn, I wrote a plan, the New Manhattan Project. Wall Street Journal, CNN, Fox News, all thought that was the way we should go to get where you want to go. So I'm not going to argue the goals. I understand the goals. All Mr. Conway was asking is, can you tell us the cost differential between getting energy one way and getting it with all of the requirements that we have put in the defense authorization bill? And I don't think we're going to get that figure any more than we got a shipbuilding plan last year. We're going to get a budget this year. But I'm just simply saying, as humbly as I can, I think it's a reasonable request. And all we get back is a repeating of what the goals are.
No, I feel like I am happy to do that if I can show you long-term savings and if I can also quantify the benefits to energy independence, mission
my good friend from
assurance.
Texas would love to have you show anything else
Okay,
if you just
good.
give him the cost.
The Defense Science Board said in its 2008 report, they said two big things. One, you are not looking at the fully burdened cost of fuel on the operational side. The actual cost of fuel is the tip of the iceberg. You're ignoring the soft underbelly, the logistics tail that it takes to get there. On the facility side, their big message was you are not taking into account the risk to mission assurance from the vulnerability of the electricity grid. And part of their recommendation was increase use of renewables in combination with several other things. They made the point, which I've made, that we don't quantify the benefits to mission assurance of this increased energy security. It's a benefit that goes unmeasured.
And I think, and I don't want to speak for him, but I think my good friend from Texas would be delighted for you to put down any other cost that you want to put down, any other projections, as long as you provide the committee with the cost of the two differentials, and then argue any way you want to go from policy. That's okay. That's fair. It's just sometimes we feel like all we get is a restatement of the goals, and nobody ever comes back with the detailed cost. And that's what Mr. Conway was asking, I think, fair, to be able to say, because at some point in time, this chairman is going to have to make a decision in his mark between planes and between bullets and between other things that we have and some of these things, and it just helps us to know if we can get those details. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, and this is so important, and this is why I said earlier, we need to work as a team together. The state legislature in Texas, as you well know, they meet once every 6 months, every 2 years. So they knew that we were about to have a problem, but they're not in session. So I think that by working together, and my question would be to the FAA, what can we do as a committee to help improve the application review process on the length of time afforded so that you can review? Or do you have the necessary authority to get more time to thoroughly review applications to protect military readiness? I mean, do you think that the 30 days that you have gives you ample time to do that? Maybe by putting the resources together, but this is going to become, believe me, a very serious problem because we haven't touched yet on solar panels. And that's going to become another issue as well. And I know because we have the wind in South Texas, and we have the sunshine, and today a hurricane. But investors are wanting to come in and invest on another system, the solar system. But can you all work and see maybe give us something in 30 days, and if it's a little more complicated, maybe 60 days? Do you think we can work together on that?
Sir, your guidance and your leadership to us is probably sufficient. We will certainly take this under consideration. It will take formal rulemaking, which, as you well know, takes a long time. But what we can do is put on our website and work with the proponents of the Wind Energy Association and the individuals who wish to bring in both solar energy and wind turbines to ask them voluntarily to come to us as early as possible. We'll also work with our partners in government to bring forth a proposal for the possibility of the ability to work with proponents in confidence to protect their ability to not communicate exactly where they want to put the wind farms or the solar energy projects to other proponents, but to work with us so that we can better analyze at a much earlier stage, as you have encouraged us to do, to determine what the impact on national readiness for defense would be.
Madam Secretary Robyn, what can we do to help you? Because, you know, we're all in the same boat. We want to work with you and each member of the panel this morning. What can we do to help you?
I think we are, to complement the FAA process, we're, as I've described, standing up a clearinghouse, a central point of contact, a 1-800 Butterball Turkey number, if you will. That's something that makes it easy for developers to come to us early on a voluntary basis. We do feel we need, we think the FAA probably needs the formal, explicit authority to take into account training and test, our training and test missions. It's not certain that their current authority includes that. Nancy mentioned a rulemaking, but some statutory guidance, statutory language might help. That's something that this interagency group led by the National Security Council is very focused on. It's one of the single biggest issues. So certainly at a minimum within 30 days, let you know where that process stands. I think that's the most concrete, that together with this clearinghouse. But with respect to training routes in particular, this give you a status report on our thinking on the need for statutory authority. It may make sense to try to use the defense bill as a way to get that authority if the other relevant committees were willing to do that.
And I can assure you that members of this committee and the staff will work with you. As you can see, this is the first time we had a hearing such as this.
Yeah.
And it's been very interesting. I think I've learned a lot. And I'm going to ask Mr. Webster, is industry prepared to provide proposals earlier, Mr. Webster?
OEA and its stakeholders have been working intimately with the public agencies to inform them as to where our abilities are present to be as transparent as possible, with the caveat that the industry is a highly competitive industry and therefore is not necessarily in unison all the time with each other. It is fair to say that this issue has become of prominent importance because of the frequency and intensity of the conflagrations that have occurred, Shepherd's Flat being the most recent, but not only one that has reached national prominence. The reality is that wind energy is a component to the national security of this country. It is a component of stabilization of a quickly destabilizing world that we're living in. Fossil fuel has become a major point of conflict that we are constantly and increasingly deploying resources to deal with, either directly or indirectly. And wind energy and solar energy and other renewables are a solution not just for the United States, but for the world. Someone has to be the leader in that. The United States has a history of being a leader in such initiatives, and we will continue to do so. To this particular point, the solutions that can be brought to bear today with the political and financial willpower to solve the wind industry's issues with respect to radars would also increase the effectiveness and the efficiency of those same radars to accomplish their mission with or without a wind turbine being impacted by it. To that end, the economic forces that the industry can bring to bear on this issue have been and will continue to be offered to the public agencies to resolve this issue, both in a policy framework as well as a technological solutions framework.
Thank you so much. You know, in the beginning, when we saw the first windmills, the concern was for wildlife. You remember that? The birds. Now it's moved to another level, readiness. And we're very concerned. But let me thank each panel member for giving us some great insight and input that you've given us today. And you and us are going to work together because this is an urgent matter that we need to address. And thank you so much. And being no further questions, this hearing stands adjourned.